kind of just understand how Palestine came to be. And so Palestine pre 1917 was under the Ottoman Empire. And it was doing well. It was flourishing. It was a land of people. It was a land that had civilization. And 1917, 1918 is when World War One ended and the British took over. And this is really important to know because the British forces when they conquered Palestine and labeled it the British Mandate of Palestine, that's when we began to see the influx and the hidden agenda. So the hidden agenda at this point was the Zionist movement of bringing the European Jews, Zionists to Palestine. And a promise was made to them. The Balfour Declaration was made to them, which aimed to give land, which promised them land that was not theirs, without the consultation of the Palestinians, of course. And they, under their propaganda, they named it a land without a people for the people without a land. And obviously Palestine was, and that's just part of, legitimizing the dispossession of the natives of Palestine. And, Palestine was very far from that. And we can see from our grandparents and our great grandparents, it was a flourishing society. The Ottomans, they built a train between Lebanon to Haifa to Medina al-Munawwara. Like there was people there, there was education there, and Khalil, for example, at that time was known for their leather and still known for their ceramics and their glass. And Jaffa was known for their metal company, and Nablus was known for their soap that we still buy till to this day, the most organic, beautiful soap to use. And the knafa, Nablus.
The knafa, of course.
Of course. And see, so there, when the refugees and the illegal settlers began, trickling through the Haifa seaport, which my grandma tells me about when she was there, she would say, like, suddenly these people came and they were armed, by the British military, and they began parading in the streets. Like it was slowly but surely, a very strong beginning of an occupation. And so jumping a few years later, there's tension obviously in the land. 1947, as we see here, right before 1948 on the map, 1947, the UN planned this partition plan, which proposed this idea of 55% of Israel, of the area would be Israel Jewish state, and 45 would be an Arab Palestinian state. And we see here the blue is the proposed for the Jewish Israeli state. And so Israel basically would get most of the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, which is the most, and they got the best land basically. So it's obviously a bias partition. When that happened, that was right after World War II. That's what happened in the Nakba. So Nakba is the catastrophe in 1948. So let me tell you from my grandmother's point of view. So my grandma was supposed to graduate high school. She was in this boarding school. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, something's going on. There's these two Zionist gangs, Haganah, which is now the IDF, and the Arjuan, which is the Jewish, like the militia. And they're just causing havoc and violence. And so, of course, at the time, my grandma, she just fled to my maternal grandma, fled to Jordan. She didn't know what was happening. She thought she was going to come back, graduate. That's what she wanted to do. But little did they know that the Nakba, the catastrophe, was the beginning of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And these Zionist gangs expelled 750,000 Palestinians. We are the grandchildren of the Nakba. We are this is what happened to our grandparents. And they caused 30 massacres. So what we see in Gaza, the massacre that we're seeing right now in Gaza is one of the 30 massacres that happened. At the time, then May 15 is when Israel declared their occupation. They declared themselves as an independent state. They killed 15,000 plus people, 530 villages wiped off the face of the planet. And my grandfather at the time, a young man, the village right beside him, Dir Yassin, which is very well known, was wiped off the face of the planet. So he fled. So my grandmother fled. My grandfather fled on his feet, carrying his younger brother. And he tells us, like his sister was carrying her children in the bucket that she used to bathe them in, on her head, running, fleeing on their feet, because they were scared, obviously. But what's so important, I'm sure you both can relate with this, is they left with their keys. And as you can see here, the key of Lauda, you know, like it's very, very huge in the Palestinian culture. We talk about this key because they left with they closed their house doors and they left because they thought it was like, you know, when a hurricane happens, you know, just kind of pack up your car and go, and you're gonna come back in a week or two. You know, that my mom's aunts hid their gold in the closet. They thought they were gonna come back. You know, they never, nobody could ever imagine or like, you know, like nobody can realize the gravity of the situation. And they fled all over, you know, they fled to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, North Africa. They fled everywhere, and that's why we're the biggest diaspora. So the third map, as we see here, 1967, is the Six-Day War.
Oh, which slide?
So it's on the same slide. So it's 1917, we said, is when the British Mandate happened. 1948 was the Catastrophe. So here, still the occupation only had this blue land, and the green was still part of Jordan, and the small green Gaza Strip was still part of Egypt. So now, 1967, obviously the Zionist movement was not happy with they didn't get all the land. The neighboring Arab countries were not happy with what's going on, and a major war erupted. The occupation took over the land, and all of Palestinian land was occupied by the Zionists. And you know, it was called a Nakba, 1967, and it didn't materialize out of a vacuum. It was an ongoing battle, but they finally took the land that they wanted, and the settlement colonization began.